To my husband, the man who still takes orders from me. If the joke had come from anyone else, I would have rolled with it. I've taken worse on the chin from clients who thought blue collar meant thick-skinned. But when it came from my wife, in our own living room, on a night that was supposed to be about closing a year strong and opening the next with bigger contracts and better margins, it hooked into me and stayed. The room burst. My brother Justin's loud bark, my neighbor Paula's sharp inhale through her nose, and Angela's, the sister-in-law I never asked for, her wine-wet laughter that somehow always sounded like she was chewing on a secret. I raised my glass, nodded. I have a nod I use when I want to end a conversation without starting a war. It looks like grace and buys me time. The nod cost nothing that night and everything in the weeks after. I caught the way Kristen looked at me over the rim of her stemless glass, appraising, like a manager finishing a performance review. For a second, I thought I saw something softer behind the sheen. Fatigue or fear or the memory of us when I was 26 and smelled like sawdust and ambition. Then the look hardened. The room carried on. I told 3 separate groups where the restroom was. I checked the oven 4 times, though the last dish to come out had been the baked ziti at 8. I'd plated it with basil because the parsley had given up in the crisper. I topped off people's drinks. I laughed where the laugh should go. I threw away paper napkins with the same 2 fingerprints pressed in grease. In a corner, the Bluetooth speaker blinked blue. At the end of the night, when the dishwasher hummed and the counters shone like ice, I lifted my glass from the sink and saw the clear mark of my mouth in a thin oval on the rim. Her joke had landed its print on me the same way. Clear, ordinary, permanent if I didn't scrub. I rinsed the glass and set it upside down on the rack. I slept poorly, like I'd swallowed a clock. I started True Parts out of a beat-up unit off Foss Avenue in Sioux Falls, back when there were more potholes than plans, and I believed both could be filled with grit and a little luck. I had an old warehouse desk I found on Craigslist and a rolling chair that favored the left. My first order was a mixed box of metric fasteners to a machine shop that smelled like hot iron and Marlboro Reds. The owner asked me if I could beat the price from the big catalogs. I told him I'd beat the price and drive the box over myself before noon. I didn't make much margin, but I shook his hand and felt a spark. It was something like ownership and something like oxygen. 2 years in, I'd learned routes and rotations, what to carry deep and what to call in, which suppliers would talk straight after 9 p.m. I built credit with 3 who didn't mind that I wore my doubt on my sleeves, but delivered on my word. The first time a shop called me the guy we use, I sat in my truck and stared at my hands until I remembered the light was green. At 26, after a day of chasing a delinquent invoice and a night of labeling bins, until my fingers picked up the stink of ink, I met Kristen. She was sitting behind the glass at a midtown law office with that particular blend of poise and tired I've only ever seen in receptionists and flight attendants. Her hair was gathered in a knot, and her eyes had that brightness inclined to appraisals. Is this person trouble, or opportunity, or both? She smiled like she had decided that I was, for the moment, neither. I handed over a retainer check for contract work I couldn't afford, and she said, "Ambitious." Not a question, not an accusation, a description that felt like a door opening. 2 years later, we got married in a church that smelled like lemon oil and old hymns. Everyone clapped like they were putting their hands together to pray for us. 6 months after that, she quit her job. She told me she wanted to focus on the home, on making our life warm and beautiful so you can go build the empire. I said yes because she framed it like love, and because the word empire fit in my chest like a larger rib cage. The company grew like a kid that eats everything, awkwardly, hungrily, undeniably. I added a partner, Ethan, the kind of steady anchor that lets you swing a little wider and not capsize. I signed loans that made my signature look important and my sleep shallow. I spent holidays eating whatever fit in the palm of my hand while I counted inventory and doubt. Through it all, I told myself I was the boss because I carried the risk and held the keys. You would be lost without me. She said it first with a laugh, then as a line item, then as a premise. At first, it fell in the category of couples banter, like the jokes people make about how I don't do laundry correctly or how she can't tell the difference between a socket and a swivel stud. You laugh because you're not ready for the quiet that would follow if you didn't. Then the banter started showing up outside the private border. Her friends, my brother, clients at our holiday mixer, a neighbor who liked to tell me about our grass. The line kept its cadence but changed its costume. Instead of a wink, it got a microphone. Instead of a nudge, it got an audience. She would introduce me as my project or the guy I keep organized. I would smile like a man with a secret. One day the numbers will make the case for me and I won't need to pay. Silence, I have learned, is not noble if it mainly protects the wrong story. It wasn't our dress gowns. There were days when she'd lean against the doorway while I knelt to fix a loose baseboard and say, "No one works like you." There were nights she curled into me, eyes shut, breath steady, and I'd watch the ceiling fan draw circles that felt like reassurance. There were weekends we drove to the lake and ate too much and did not talk about money or timelines or growth. But the public voice hardened. It stopped being a surface habit and became her operating system. When someone jokes enough times about how they leash you, it starts to mean they've been practicing ways to yank. I didn't tell anyone. Ethan looked at me once after a barbecue where she told the story about how I allegedly forgot our anniversary. "Did you?" he asked, not unkind. "No," I said. "We went to Rue Alma. She ordered the halibut." He nodded and watched a kid kick a soccer ball into the fence like he was watching the future check itself for holes. The call came a little after lunch from my accountant, whose voice has a way of inserting itself into your bloodstream with tiny needles. "There's a $50,000 withdrawal from your business debit," he said. "Dated last week. It might be a vendor I haven't seen before, Lucien Interiors LLC, but it's on your card." I keep the business debit locked in a small safe in my office. I'm not paranoid. I'm careful the way you get careful when you've been one mistake away from payroll bouncing and having to look a guy who's supported his family for 10 years, dead in the eye. "Run it back," I said. He ran it back. Lucien Interiors, LLC. A clean, smug kind of name. There were smaller debits too and transfers like children who follow a tall parent into a crowd. 5,000 there, 10 there, 8, 3. The way a year disappears when every weekend costs $50 and you don't keep track. I drove home. The air had the thin feeling of spring in South Dakota, the kind that tricks you with blue sky while the wind knifes your jacket for sport. Kristen was at the kitchen table, a gentle boardwalk of paper catalogs fanned out, and a laptop angled like it needed privacy. "Did you take 50 from the business account?" I asked, feeling ridiculous for sounding so casual about a year of one man's wages. She didn't look up. "I needed it," she said, as if the more adult reply were self-evident and I was failing a comprehension quiz. "It's company money." She looked at me then, truly looked, her eyes two strict bright cones. "We are married," she said, as if reciting a legal course. "What's yours is mine. You can stand in the kitchen you paid for and feel suddenly like a guest in a house museum. You can be told a sentence everyone prints on plaques and realize for the first time how little that sentence says about respect." I went to my home office and ran history. Over the last 12 months, the numbers assembled themselves into a picture like a Polaroid finally shaking into clarity. 105 in scattered withdrawals, another 75 sitting like a coiled snake on a card I had never authorized but was somehow responsible for, and a trail of spa days and out-of-town weekends with Angela that formed a new kind of geography in my finances. The nation of somebody else's life. I called Ethan, who exhaled like he was bracing for a weather report and a wake. "You need to protect yourself," he said. It sounded harsh and kind at the same time. "I love her," I said, and hated myself for feeling like I was asking permission to keep that sentence. "I know," he said. "Protect yourself anyway." The next morning I called Gabriella. She had handled contract work for me since the days when I still stapled checks to invoices out of superstition. Her office is a neat arrangement of warm wood and cool logic. She listens like someone who is collecting your words in a jar so she can label them later. Habit span, self-erasure, financial exposure. "You need to move fast," she said. "If she has access to the accounts, she will drain them before she slows down." That's not an indictment. That's an observation I have made in 100 similar cases. "You've seen this before," I said. "I've seen both genders do it, but I've rarely seen someone stop it without decisive steps." The steps were not elegant. Change the locks at the office. Change the passwords to every business account and all the secondary ones you forget you have until you scroll. The backup savings you opened after a bank promotion. The credit line you thought you'd never touch. Call the bank. Freeze the business debit. If he asks for a reason, say stolen, because as far as the law is concerned, it was. I did the steps. I thought of addicts who described the first clear breath after a long fog. It wasn't joy, it was oxygen. It was room. Kristen called at 3:12. My card isn't working. It's not your card, I said. You're serious, she said. And the word serious cracked right down the middle. One side shock, one side contempt. You took 105, I said. And there's a card I never signed for with 75 in my name. She laughed. It was a sound I knew well, and it rose out of her throat like a rope. You're married, Roland. This is ridiculous. It isn't about money. Then what is it about? When someone steals from you and tells you it isn't about money, believe them. It's about control. I slept at a hotel that night. The bed was either too soft or I was too hard. I watched an exercise show with the sound off, bodies bouncing into forms they didn't know they had. I turned the TV to the weather, then to the local news where a smiling anchor announced a community bake sale like we were all living in a tidy county that could be mended with powdered sugar. Kristen left 2 voicemails. Come home, you're being childish, the first one said. I don't understand why you're doing this, the second one said, which told me she understood exactly. 2 days later, Kristen filed for a separation. Her attorney's letter said I'd been financially abusive, that I controlled all the money, that she had been left without agency. The irony of someone driving a stolen car and complaining about the seat position would have been funny on another planet. She also claimed half the business. Gabriella laughed. Not mean, not gloating, just a short clear bell that said, If they claim a portion of the business by contribution, she said, we'll show what the contribution has been. It opens a door for us to bring the audit right to the table and slide it across. Her team documented everything, the withdrawals, the dates, the merchant names that read like a catalog of wants, the card application that bore my printed name, and someone else's signatures, the spa and the furniture and the weekends with Angela. None was a crime alone. Together, they formed a patterned intent. Do not fight this online, Gabriella said. Do not post, do not hint, do not give anyone a paragraph they can paste into a comment string and use to insist you're angry. I didn't. Ethan, though, wrote 6 words on his personal page. Know the whole story before you judge. It was the online equivalent of leaving a glass of water out on a porch for a stranger. Quietly kind, no sermon. Angela came to the office in person. She tried to come in. Ethan met her at the door like a linebacker, made of paperwork and policy. You're ruining her life, she said. You're a coward. We're closed to the public after 5, he said, and I'm not the public. Someone took a video from the parking lot. It did what small town videos do. It hydrated gossip into a river. People watched the way she jabbed a finger in Ethan's chest and decided, some of them for the first time, that maybe the sister's little jokes about me weren't just wit. The mediator scheduled an emergency meeting when Gabriella filed an addendum that used words like fraud and identity theft and attached proof I had never seen before. The card application, the digital handwriting analysis, the string of bills routed to an email that was mine except for an extra period snuck into the address. A magician's death. We sat across from one another in a mediator's neutral room. Uncomfortable chairs have a way of making last. Kristen stared at the table. Her lawyer attempted a weak pivot, that the card was joint, that I had had access. Gabriella slid the file across. My client never signed, she said. He never saw the statements. He never knew the card existed. He shouldn't have to know the shape of a crime to prove he didn't commit it. The mediator asked if there was any version of settlement that didn't involve court. Yes, Gabriella said. She gets none of the business. She's responsible for half the personal debt. She signs an admission of unauthorized withdrawals. We keep discovery out of the courtroom and everyone goes home. Everyone didn't go home. I did. I went to a small house on the east side that I'd seen once on a jog and told myself I'd like when my head stopped ringing. And for the first time in 12 weeks, I slept. There's a phase after a public rupture when everyone tries on new roles to see which one fits. Justin apologized. He had believed her for a while. You were acting weird, he said. I figured another midlife entrepreneur with a temper story. I should have asked. I hugged him with both hands like I was anchoring us both. We're fine, I said, and meant it. Paula the neighbor met me in aisle 7 at the hardware store while I considered 30 different kinds of wood screws as if any one of them might carry a moral lesson. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice low, like we were in church. I laughed that night. I didn't know. I told her it was okay, that she didn't have to lift this with me. She insisted, and I let her have the dignity of a small, decent weight. At the warehouse, Greg, my best floor supervisor, human forklift of spirits when things got heavy, pulled me aside between loading bays 9 and 10. "Boss," he said, "whatever you're going through, you're handling it right." It landed like confirmation and like a dare to keep choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. Kristen kept working the narrative a while. Online posts that used the phrase abandoned. A few photos with starting over captions stapled to them like excuses. The only thing I felt when I saw them, through other people's phones, never my own, was a stillness that wasn't triumph. Relief can be so quiet, it scares you. The article came out 3 months later. Local distributor expands to 3 states. They quoted me and spelled true parts right. They didn't mention Kristen, which is how history happens after the dust. The wrong names fade out, not because anyone erased them, but because they never belonged in the story about building. I bought the smaller place for reasons that answered questions people didn't ask aloud. Is he going to chase Flash to prove he's okay? Is he going to put granite everywhere? Is he going to buy a boat and call it alimony? No. I built a square little house with a porch that asked for paint, a yard that wanted work, and rooms that felt like they could hold laughter without echoing too long. I moved slowly, one room at a time, like I was learning a neighbor's name. I took the old shutters off and painted them one Saturday, while a baseball game hummed from a radio I'd had since the kind of summer when dust looked like gold because the sun caught it just right. I planted marigolds because I like the way they try so hard. I hung a picture of the first True Pots team, the grainy photo where Ethan's hair is doing something gravity can't explain, and I look like a man who thinks exhaustion is a personality trait. I took calls from clients who said, "We heard some stuff, didn't feel right, we waited." I signed 2 new contracts that quarter and learned that there's a kind of trust money can't buy and disrespect can't hold. Some evenings I met a woman named Claire for dinner. She taught 4th grade and wore the patient strength of those who shape other people's small chaos into something like sentences. She asked about my work and listened like it was a story, not a brag. I didn't tell her everything. I told her the boat version, the one with the life jackets counted and the seagulls described from a distance. She never asked to see the bruises. She just didn't bump them. When we were at a restaurant once, I saw Kristen at the bar. She looked tired in a way that has nothing to do with sleep. She turned away, and for the first time, I felt not anger, not the acid burn of injustice, but a thin gratitude that our stories had finally split into lanes that no longer ran side by side. I drove past the old house the next week. Somebody had painted the shutters a better color than I'd ever picked and planted flowers I hadn't learned yet. It looked like a life. Good, let it be someone else's. Removing someone's access to your life does not remove their habit of reaching. Angela sent an email long as a confession and as slick as a flyer. It used words like deserved, duty, and karma. I read the first paragraph and clicked delete so fast my index finger felt righteous. Kristen sent word through Justin's texts. Rent help, a new start, a step toward our old dream. The way she used the word our felt like breaking into a house we once rented together and trying to find where we kept the blankets. No, I said to Justin. Tell her no. He said it for me. He didn't report her reaction back, and I didn't ask. There are mercies in not knowing. There were, as the lawyers promised, consequences. Bankruptcy filed. Petitions denied on account of our earlier settlement. A job at a dental office, answering phones and making copies. Full circle. People say that like it's cosmic symmetry. I try not to say it at all. What I call it is the job we can get when our habits have made other jobs unavailable. This is the part where stories often reach for a gun, where the wronged man stands on a hill and watches the house of his enemy burn, as proof that the fire was worth it. There is no house burning here. There is only a person learning how to live with less applause and more bills. My part in that lesson was over. Claire came by one Saturday with a crate of classroom books and asked if I had the tools to help her build a low shelf. I laid the pieces out on the garage floor and told her a corny joke about the one Allen key that rules them all. She didn't laugh to be sweet. She laughed because she found it funny. Then she set the planks like she trusted me with the shape of something her kids would drag their fingers across. Justin pulled up in his Ford with a rattle in the wheel well that said, "Ignore me and I will become your Sunday." We finally pulled the tire and found the culprit. A small screw that had lodged itself in rubber like a thought you can't shed. We fixed it and drank 2 beers each like we had invented solutions. He looked out over the marigolds and said, "I'm glad you're okay." It was, for us, a kind of "I love you" that didn't embarrass us. At the warehouse, I promoted Greg to operations manager and stood him in front of the team and said words that I meant and that cost me nothing to say. He's earned this. He shook my hand like he had been braced for it not to happen. Some men shrug off thanks because they have not been given it often enough to know what to do with it. I gave it anyway. A newspaper ran a story about local businesses that made it through the rough years with their sanity intact. My picture was not good. The photographer caught me halfway through a sentence looking like I was confessing, but the tone was right. They quoted a line I didn't remember saying. "We didn't grow because it got easy. We grew because it got clear." Reading it felt like meeting the smarter version of myself. Some nights when the house settled and the refrigerator made its small animal hum and the street outside remembered it was a street, I lay there and thought about the version of me that almost stayed. There's a timeline where I never called Gabriella, where I allowed another 1,000 humiliations because I mistook endurance for virtue and paying for control for love. That version of me runs out of money and names and ends up looking at a company that won't be his anymore and a life that strikes a match in his hand and calls it light. I am not that man. I owe the version of me that I became more than a thank you. I owe him life. I have wondered what I would do if a year from now I threw a party. I would not do it to prove anything. I would do it because I like when people who work hard get to loosen their shoulders and eat something that tells them they live in a world that sometimes rewards effort with warmth. I would invite the crew and the plans and my brother and his noise. I would invite Paula because she apologized and that's rare currency. I would invite the high school kid on second shift who keeps asking smart questions like he's laying down tracks for the train he wants to drive. I would ask Claire if she wants to bring the 3rd graders' thank you drawings and tape them up in the break room so the warehouse smells a little like crayons and future. If someone lifted a glass and asked me to speak, I would keep it short because long speeches lose their edges. I would say, "Thank you. We showed up. We kept our hands on what we built. We made it through the dumb parts by learning faster than we fell. We learned that respect is a verb. And we learned that silence, if it hides disrespect, is just pain with a pleasant voice. And if anyone tried a joke that cut the way hers did, I would let it thud to the floor like a dropped utensil and not rush to pick it up. I would stand there and look the room in the eye and let the quiet do the work it's meant for, resetting the frame. After, I would wash dishes while the dishwasher hummed its content machine hum. I would lift a glass and see a clear oval on the rim. I would wipe it with a towel that smells like a clean start. Then I would lay the glass down, upside down, and sleep without a clock in my throat. You did not fail because you didn't fight every battle. You failed because you handed over the story and called it patience. You thought the money you stacked would buy you a voice. It won't. Voices aren't purchased, they're practiced and protected. You can be both. The man who pays for the roof and the man who insists the roof doesn't drip. You can be generous and have boundaries. You can love someone and not fund their worst habits. You can leave a room you paid for and still feel richer outside it. There's a sentence I carry now like a spare key. Stand up before they sit you down. Not because it's brave, but because it keeps you from learning the hard way that standing up from the floor makes your knees old. If that sentence helps, take it. If it doesn't, take this one instead. What you build with your hands deserves your voice. Don't mute yourself and call it maturity. Don't call a gag a vow. I am not a hero. I am a man who made an inventory of his life and tossed what was corroded. I am a man who replaced a few bolts that held a marriage together and realized the frame was wrong. I am a man who learned the difference between a partner and an auditor. I am a man who cut new keys to his own doors. If you're reading this and recognize the furniture, open a window, let some air in, call someone who knows what to do with evidence and grief. Change a lock, change a password, cancel a card, pick one boundary and make it real before lunch. Build your courage like you built your business, one necessary part, ordered and installed. And then, go to bed early. The morning is clearer when you've earned it. Here is what after looks like. A calendar with fewer red circles and more pencil lines. A porch where the evening settles like a dog that knows its name. A warehouse with 10 more people and a safety meeting where everyone actually listens. A younger team member who catches you before you say good enough and asks if the spec could be tighter, and you grin because he's right. A brother who swings by with a six-pack and the next morning's apology text because he left the cans on the porch railing and 3 of them fell into the marigolds. You text him back a photo of the flowers and a caption. They liked the company. A partner who has stopped asking if you're okay because he can see that you are. A lawyer who sends an email that says simply, case closed. A credit score that climbs like a man who took his hands off the weights and remembered he likes to run. A woman who pours you coffee and asks what your day looks like, and when you list the messy, the manageable, and the one thing that could go sideways, she says, "You've got it," and you believe her not because you need to, but because she has never lied to you about the distance from here to okay. A town that remembers you, not as the punchline, but as the guy who brings what you ordered when you need it and doesn't talk about himself unless you ask. A self that stands up straight in rooms you used to tilt in. After it's so ordinary, you forget to name it. Do. Name it. Call it earned. I built a machine parts company with hands that have more scars than I can account for and a back that complains mainly on Sundays. I married a woman who, for a while, felt like a partner and then turned into an auditor. I allowed the narrative to travel without me until it returned like a debt. I called a lawyer. I changed some locks. I said no out loud until the words stopped tasting like guilt. I paid what I owed and refused what I didn't. I walked away without looking back more than twice. The ledger isn't justice, it's balance. She owes things to banks and to time that I will never collect. I owe things to myself. I am collecting. If you need a number, here it is, 0. The number of jokes I will sit still for that make me smaller. The number of times I will let a boundary dissolve because it's awkward to hold. The number of rooms I will remain in that require me to become less in order to keep the peace. If you need another, 1. The number of lives I am responsible for steering with clarity and respect. If you need a last, 9. The number of people I will employ and treat like they own something besides wages. The number of small mercies I will allow myself. Marigolds, a good chair, a Saturday nap. The number of days I will wake up and think not about who watched me fall, but about what I'm building next.